Right now, breaking news here. Stocks all around the world are tanking because of the crisis on Wall Street.
What happened in 2008 or 9? That was a financial earthquake, felt around the world.
The 2008 financial crisis was one of the worst economic disasters since 1929. This crisis led to the Great Recession when house prices fell almost 32%. Unemployment rose and the demand for houses decreased.
Mistrust within the banking industry was one of the main reasons for the crisis. However, the real cause of the 2008 financial crisis was the rapid increase in the number of unregulated derivatives during the time.
These complicated financial products derive their value from an underlying asset or index. A good example of a derivative is a mortgage-backed security. Derivatives are the legal contracts that set the terms of a transaction and can be bought or sold as terms in the contract.
Originally, derivatives were all about bringing price stability to products that can be quite volatile or changeable in the pricing over time.
Another way to explain derivatives is using the collateral debt obligation, or CDO. This means that if there is a debt to someone, they are obligated to pay it. For instance, a mortgage. This is supposed to be an incredibly safe investment because the likelihood of it collapsing is nearly impossible.
There are 4 different mortgages, from prime AAA, which should be 90% of the CDO, then AA at 6%, A 2%, and the most unsafe BBB, also 2%. At a point in time, CDOs became less reliable as many of the mortgages became BBB rather than prime AAA mortgages, and a wealthy businessman named Michael Burry came to the conclusion that this system would fail in the years to come.
You got out of everything else and bought credit default swaps betting against the housing market, right?
Right. We bought basically short $8.4 billion of credit default swaps related to mortgages or financial companies.
You must have been pretty confident that this thing was going to blow up.
Well, we had a giant bet for us, and I was extremely confident in the outcome.
Were your investors as confident?
I think a few investors were.
Some of them thought you were crazy. Some of them probably thought you'd lost your mind.
I know for sure that some of them thought I lost my mind.
So you made a ton of money?
Made a ton of money. Much more than I ever imagined, I'd ever have.
Were your clients grateful?
I think a lot of clients were just glad to be done with it at the end.
Even though they doubled their money?
Well, we made $725 million, I think, on the funds in 2007, and in the first 6 months of 2008, there was about $730 million in withdrawals. Perhaps I had made the trade too big for the fund, and my confidence in the trade had ticked off some people.
Even though you made them rich?
It's remarkable. There are investors who made tens of millions off this, and we're still pretty upset.
The reason CDOs were created is because buying a house is not only a cultural thing, but a house is forever. In the end, the people's houses were worth very little, and it became nearly impossible to buy a house during 2008.
There are 4 different types of derivatives: forward, future, options, and swaps. Credit default swaps are the primary cause in the situation of 2008. A credit default swap derivative is a private agreement between 2 parties to exchange cash flows in the future according to a prearranged formula.
Swap derivatives are unreliable. Basically, you are swapping a floating rate for a fixed rate. Because of this problem, legislation was passed in 2008, which requires swaps to be traded through swap execution facilities. This is intended to prevent a ripple effect, impacting the economy negatively.
Warren Buffett, a businessman and philanthropist, believed derivatives are weapons of mass destruction. This is because prices change and add a degree of uncertainty and risk for those who either produce or purchase in large quantities.
I'm curious, do you believe that credit default swaps should exist? They should be outlawed? What should happen to them?
Well, they can be a very destructive instrument. I mean, if you think about it, you can't go out and insure my house against fire because you do not have an insurable interest, as they call it in the trade. Because once you insure my house against fire, and you may decide that, that maybe dropping a few matches around my lawn might be a good idea. And credit default swaps, if you don't own underlying debt and you buy a credit default swap, you have an interest in that place getting into trouble. And when a lot of people have an interest in a place getting in trouble, they may start putting out misleading statements about it. I mean, if you had a bank, if you were short the stock of a bank, you might hire, and there wasn't any FDIC, you might go out and hire 100 movie extras to stand in front of that bank. And in effect, you would create your own reality. Now, buying credit default swaps and talking about them and causing the price of credit default swaps to go up creates its own reality to some degree. So I think they are potentially a very antisocial instrument.
Warren Buffett has spoken out about this. He is quoted saying, essentially, these instruments call for money to change hands at some future date, with the amount to be determined by one or more reference items, such as interest rates, stock prices, or currency values.